Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Online outrage. A BC company apologizes after a controversial 51st State ad sparks backlash.
It was too soon. They made the joke at a time when we're taking Trump very seriously.
It's a bit bold, but it is really current, and it is sort of what's trending now.
Plus, with a federal election call on the horizon, what's top of mind for voters and why BC is a province to watch closely in the race. And the BC government pushes back its free IVF program.
I know it's frustrating for a lot of people that I know that we're planning to utilize that funding in April.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Baneet Braich. A local company is apologizing after an ad drew huge online backlash. The mural referenced Donald Trump's ongoing references to Canada as the 51st state. While the company has promised to remove it, Liam Britton shows us how current events and marketing can be a controversial mix.
And here's my problem with Canada. Canada was meant to be the 51st state.
Donald Trump's annexation talk, like on Fox News yesterday, has many Canadians on edge. But Richmond supplement maker Herbaland referenced it in an ad that's definitely turning heads. The message text at Vancouver City Centre Station, quote, proudly made in, and in brackets and crossed out, the 51st state, with Canada uncrossed, unbracketed.
Also, they've been very nasty to us on trade.
Trump's 51st state talk was first said to be a joke, but increasingly Canadian officials, including former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, have said it needs to be taken seriously. So, should an ad put 51st state and Canada side by side?
The sign seems to be drawing a mixed reaction. Some here saying it's a cheeky sign of Canadian defiance in the face of tariff and even annexation threats from the U.S., but others, especially online, calling it downright inappropriate.
Well, I just liked the crossing out the 51st state and then putting Canada because, yeah, we're Canada. We're always going to be Canada.
Thumbs up against the United States and their dreams of annexation.
Have a little fun with it and be a bit cheeky and playful.
Those sentiments not reflected on popular social media site Reddit. Are these people crazy? The whole thing about calling us the 51st is not funny. It's completely unacceptable, even as a joke. The company late Tuesday said they would pull the sign down, writing on social media, "Our goal with this mural was to take a stand against the idea of being the 51st state. We are truly sorry for the distress that this has caused." A marketing expert described this as a lesson in timing and tone.
It was too soon. They made the joke at a time when we're taking Trump very seriously.
With U.S. politics fueling concern in this country, reaction to this ad could be a sign of the times. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
With a federal election call around the corner, BC is a province to watch after a recent tight provincial election. And as Mira Baines reports, electoral boundary changes could also be a catalyst in causing ridings to swing.
BC could play an important role on election night, as recent polls suggest it may be a nail-biter for the federal Liberals and Conservatives. And with British Columbians watching closely for how election issues are addressed.
Housing, always.
We want to have a strong business here in Canada because nobody have any chance to save money right now.
We're from Vancouver Island and we haven't had a doctor in 6 years.
Another key question: who is the best person to deal with U.S. President Donald Trump and its tariffs? Sources say Prime Minister Mark Carney could call a snap election on Sunday. The Conservatives are expected to be ready out of the gate.
Conservatives are going to come at him really hard, and they're going to want to see him make mistakes, and they're going to want to dent him early to put him into a spiral.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has enjoyed a surge of support in BC by doubling down on tax cuts, in particular on Vancouver Island, the Interior, the Kootenays, and Northern BC.
Pretty consistently, we're seeing gains by the Liberals at the expense of the NDP, but also in some key ridings outside of Metro Vancouver, the Conservatives seem to be looking to pick up ridings from the NDP as well.
While some lower mainland ridings, like Richmond, could shift to support the Conservatives, this strategist says it might be difficult for the blue wave to materialize elsewhere.
Poilievre thought that he was going to have a campaign about the carbon tax, and he thought he was going to have a campaign about Trudeau, and he doesn't have either of those issues anymore.
This former NDP advisor says there is an easy argument to make for leader Jagmeet Singh.
There are two guys standing over there that have a track record of helping the rich get even richer, and that's at the expense of you.
Still, there are ridings like Vancouver, Fraserview, South Burnaby, which is up for grabs. The electoral boundaries have changed significantly. Liberal Cabinet Minister Harjit Sajjan has said he won't be running there this election. An election date could be as early as April 28th. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
With that election on the horizon, the federal Conservatives are ending a decades-old tradition. The party says journalists won't be allowed to travel with leader Pierre Poilievre on his campaign plane and bus during the upcoming election. JP Tasker has more on what that means when the race officially kicks off.
In an unprecedented move, the Conservative Party is blocking political reporters from traveling with Pierre Poilievre in the upcoming federal election campaign. This means reporters won't be able to travel on the campaign plane or bus with Pierre Poilievre once that election campaign gets underway. This matters because it won't be as easy to go to Pierre Poilievre's events, especially those that are in more remote locations, more rural, northern places where it's difficult to get to, and it won't be as easy to ask him questions and hold him to account. It's also difficult for political reporters to meet everyday people and voters and tell their stories to a larger audience. The Conservative campaign manager says journalists can still attend the events and they can ask questions remotely. There'll be a conferencing service set up for people to dial in and ask their questions. They don't actually have to be on the ground to interact with Pierre Poilievre. The NDP, the Bloc, and the Liberals have all said reporters can follow them across the country. They're free to come on their campaign planes or buses. The Greens don't have a bus or plane this time. As with all the past election campaigns, reporters will not be getting a free ride. They will have to pay their fare to follow the leaders across the country.
And that again was CBC's JP Tasker. China is imposing retaliatory tariffs on Canadian agricultural products today. This is in response to Canada's recent levies on Chinese-made EVs, aluminum and steel products. And CBC's Michelle Morton shows us how BC producers are dealing with that shakeup.
A double whammy is ahead for the Canadian seafood industry, with tariffs in effect from China as of Thursday, and in a couple of weeks, expected tariffs from the U.S. First, China is hitting Canada with a 25% tariff on seafood. The list of more than 40 products includes lobster, crab, prawns, shrimp, halibut, and more. In Richmond, seafood distributor 7 Seas says it won't likely see or feel the impacts of the tariffs until May or June, when the spot prawn fishery starts. And they sell more spot prawns to China than anywhere else.
It's definitely going to be tough. You amplify this trade tension with China with what we're experiencing with our neighbors south of the border, and it's definitely going to be a very complicated year. It's going to be devastating for fishermen that fish spot prawns and Dungeness crab in the Pacific.
Meanwhile, the BC Shellfish Growers Association says some of their members have already stopped harvesting because sales are uncertain.
You could sit on your stock and you potentially would be able to sell it on a future date if you develop markets or things change with regards to the tariffs. But cash flow constraint is obviously a big concern.
The Fisheries Council of Canada told CBC News 16% of Canadian seafood gets exported to China and 67% to the U.S. That means more than 80% of all seafood exported from Canada could be subject to tariffs in less than 2 weeks if the U.S. follows through on its plan to introduce tariffs on April 2nd.
We just want clarity. It's going to take all of us banding together in order to get through this as an industry, as a company.
BC's Ministry of Jobs and Economic Development says it's working with industry and seafood companies to diversify exports locally within Canada and overseas. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Richmond.
The BC government is hitting pause on a program for publicly funded IVF. Now, in 2024, it announced plans to fund one round of IVF for people trying to have a baby. But now, as Katie DeRosa reports, those relying on that funding will have to wait a little bit longer, with that program delayed by 3 months.
It's been more than a year since people trying to get pregnant through in vitro fertilization, or IVF, found out they could tap into provincial funding to help offset the cost. But the program, which was supposed to open for applications this April, has now been pushed back to July.
We recognize that the 3-month delay has added a little bit of anxiety and stress for some people.
The health minister says it's a new program and took longer than expected to get off the ground. People between the age of 18 and 41 will be eligible for funding for one round of IVF, which costs an average of between $15,000 and $20,000. Osborne said anyone who turns 42 between April and July will still be eligible to apply.
Making sure that people are not, don't become ineligible because of that.
One Conservative MLA says that delay, even of a few months, is devastating for people already waiting so long to have a baby.
I think it's devastating for a lot of people that I know that were planning to utilize that funding in April. And now that it's been pushed back again, not surprising, but definitely frustrating.
Braich and her partner have struggled to get pregnant for years and are waiting to be referred to a gynecologist, the first step before being referred to a fertility clinic. If they do go the IVF route, she will likely be relying on government funding. The program will cost taxpayers $34 million a year. Dr. Arayu Zhang with the Olive Fertility Center says many families are in a holding pattern.
We don't yet know what are the how the funding will be organized and managed and prioritized for patients. So everyone's kind of awaiting with bated breath the details, and it's hard for patients, I think, not to have any concrete information on that.
The clinic sees more than 6,000 new patients a year, and Dr. Zhang says some have decided to go ahead with IVF without waiting for the funding. Applications must be submitted by the patient's doctor because of the detailed medical information required. Once applications do open in July, it's unclear how long people will wait before the funding comes through. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
The BC government is cancelling a secondary suite incentive program that it started in 2023 to encourage homeowners to build additional units. Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon says the decision will free up $40 million to spend elsewhere on housing. He says the federal government is planning to launch a similar program with double the available cash for homeowners. Kahlon says British Columbians can take advantage of this federal program while the saved money can be used elsewhere.
Well, we're dealing with potential tariffs coming April 4th, and we need the flexibility in dollars to be able to respond quickly. And that's the pressure we felt to make a decision now.
People have until March 30th to get their applications in. And a new study out of UBC finds that TikTok has a lot of popular content that focuses on ADHD. But most of that content is inaccurate and has influenced how young adults perceive this disorder. The study found out of 100 most viewed TikToks about ADHD, less than half the claims made about symptoms actually align with clinical guidelines.
I recognize that most of them come from a really good place, that they want to connect with others. Maybe they want to share their experiences, make other people feel better. That's wonderful. But, words have power. And when you have a platform, you yield a certain amount of power, and you have to be a little careful about that.
She says the key takeaway of the study is not for people to stop using social media to talk about mental health, but rather to caution users to fact-check information that they find online. And Darius Madavi joins us now with a first look at the weather. Darius, how's it looking out there?
Well, it is the first day of spring, but if you're planning to drive on some of the mountain passes in southern BC, it might not feel that way because there is quite a bit of snow coming, 20 to 30 centimeters for the Coquihalla. But happy Nowruz, happy Persian New Year to all those who celebrate. I now want to talk a little bit about the precipitation that we're seeing filter into the south coast because, as you can see, lots of rain on the way, freezing levels to come up a smidge, but still seeing lots of snow up at those higher elevations and lots more on the way. We're going to see this come in waves, and then the next big one comes Saturday night into Sunday. But for now, get ready for a very significant wave on Sunday. For now, get through this one, and then we'll worry about that later.
And we shall. All right. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
And Some people in Vancouver's Afghan community are asking Canada for help. We'll tell you what they're asking for and why after the break. The Burnaby Fire Department says an early morning fire at an apartment building sent 15 people to hospital with 3 in serious condition. About 20 people were displaced. Now, some of these impacted by the blaze say they are still shaken up. CBC's Liam Britton has been following the story.
You can see behind me here, Hall Tower 1 in Burnaby on Kingsway near Edmonds. This was the scene of last night's 3-alarm fire that called out almost 50 firefighters to put out. And still here on the scene today, this morning, still crews and investigators looking into what happened. The call came around 3 a.m. A number of fire trucks along with over a dozen ambulances raced to the scene. A spokesperson for Burnaby Fire said flames sparked on the 4th floor and smoke billowed from the 3rd to the 12th.
It looks like quite significant damage on the 4th floor because the door of the fire compartment was left open. And it's really important that if somebody has a fire, that they do close the doors. Fire doors are rated and they will protect from the smoke and the flames.
Rushton said the building doesn't have sprinklers, likely because they weren't required when it was built. Adding batteries from e-bikes and e-scooters posed additional challenges for crews. Some people are back in their suites now, but all were evacuated.
We were trying to go down the stairwell, but we couldn't get down the stairwell at all. It was too smoky on either end. There was nowhere to go but back in your apartment. So we were told to stay in our apartment and keep the windows closed, which we did. Some people were very, very scared, like myself. My nerves are terrible at the moment.
The building is run by BC Housing. It's open to those 55 and older or younger people with a disability. Now, this building is wheelchair accessible with both pets and smoking allowed, although one resident said newer residents have been told they can't smoke in their units. Burnaby Fire says the cause of the fire is still under investigation. Liam Britton, CBC News, Burnaby.
And Vancouver's Afghan community is calling on Canada to help Afghan women studying abroad. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is canceling scholarships for over 120 women. As Yasmin Renea reports, they could face dire consequences if they have to go back to Afghanistan.
There's millions of girls in Afghanistan that are hoping to come to here.
Hila Sadeki says she's one of the lucky ones. After years of being banned from school in Afghanistan, she got a scholarship from this Vancouver private school.
I think it's the best feeling, like that's what we wanted for our life, to study without restriction.
Sadeki worries as more than 120 Afghan women with U.S.-funded scholarships may soon have to return to Taliban rule. Last month, the women studying at universities in Qatar and Oman were told their scholarships will be ending because of sweeping cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development. Donald Trump's administration has accused the agency of wasting taxpayer money and criticized programs for not aligning with American foreign policy goals. The students have been told they will be getting travel arrangements back to Afghanistan. The U.S. State Department says the scholarships will be funded until June 30th and did not answer questions from CBC News about extending the funding.
The situation is dire in Afghanistan, and it's worse than we think. It's devastating.
The Taliban have banned girls from going to school past the 6th grade, and under the group's harsh control, women have been subjected to cruel punishments, say human rights groups.
The punishments consist of flogging, lashing, imprisonment, torture, and even worse, death penalty.
It's really dangerous for them to go back to Afghanistan, and offering a scholarship is the only way that we can help them.
Sadeki and other members of Vancouver's Afghan community are calling on Canadian universities and the federal government to bring the women here. But this expert in forced migration says that could be difficult.
The government has recently decided to reduce the number of international students that they're admitting, and most universities have already filled those quotas.
Global Affairs Canada says it's working with education stakeholders in Afghanistan to understand the impact of USAID cuts. Sadeki says Canada should make all efforts possible.
We'll not let them go back to Afghanistan, and we would definitely help them.
Because she says in this case, a university degree is also a lifeline. Yasmin Renea, CBC News, Vancouver.
And a look at the day that was in Revelstoke. Darius will have your full BC-wide weather forecast after the break. Tensions are high in the auto industry amid recent political controversy over U.S. electric car maker Tesla. There have been reports of vandalism and protests at Tesla dealerships here in BC and across Canada. Now, this comes partly due to owner Elon Musk's proximity to U.S. President Donald Trump. And this week, the Vancouver International Auto Car Show removed U.S. electric car maker Tesla from its event, saying its primary concern was the safety of attendees and exhibitors. And in the latest hit to the company, over 46,000 Tesla Cybertrucks are being recalled to fix the stainless steel exterior panel that could detach and fall off while driving. All of this is leaving local sellers in a difficult place, navigating the political climate while still trying to sell their products. Now, Sean Thompson is a co-owner of Factor E, a Canadian company that repairs electric vehicles and has recently started buying and selling Teslas. He joins us now. Sean, what has business been like over these past couple of weeks?
For us, we're not really huge into the selling of vehicles just yet. So for us, our business has actually been pretty stable, pretty steady, and still growing. So we personally haven't seen a change at our location.
And in light of, the political climate, have you been involved in conversations about political implications on the company with customers or even coworkers?
Just a little bit. For us, most of our business is service oriented, so we're dealing with longtime customers that have had the cars for years. So we've had a few conversations and stuff like that, but nothing serious. Because again, we're independently owned. We're not Tesla, so we don't really get deep into those too often.
And what are your key concerns right now?
For us, for our business, we're quite stable and quite happy where we're at. Really, where we're at right now is just the shock. It's quite, as I was saying to others, the shock of the situation right now. Because for us, we're deeply passionate about electric vehicles, whether that be Tesla or other ones. We truly do believe that they're better for the environment and better for the world generally. So we're huge supporters in that, and we've been longtime Tesla employees and carried on our own business afterwards as Tesla. Like we believe in that. What we're more shocked and saddened about is that message is all kind of getting swept to the side basically right now because there's other political stuff happening.
And Sean, just looking ahead, what are you hoping will change in the coming months?
For us, we'd like to get back to a much more stable, calm environment where politics isn't front and center, and get hopefully some calmer mindset and some stability comes back to it. Because again, as I said, like what's lost in all of this from our point of view is the electric vehicle business, if you will, and the continued growth and the rollout of it as people transition to that. It's kind of getting caught up in this situation, and that's what we're most saddened and shocked about, because there's so many great electric vehicles out there, not just Tesla but other brands as well, and that seems to be lost right now. Like nobody's talking about that. Even the auto show, I mean, that's the whole point, is to see those great products, and really everyone's talking about the situation of Tesla not being there, right?
All right, that again is Sean Thompson, who is the co-owner of Factor E. Sean, thank you so much again for joining us.
You're welcome.
CBC News has learned that Canadians will be heading to the polls in a matter of weeks. On Sunday, Prime Minister Mark Carney will ask the Governor General to dissolve Parliament. As Ashley Burke reports, that means an election could come as soon as April 28th.
The Prime Minister hit the ice with the Edmonton Oilers as he gets ready to hit the campaign trail. Sources say Mark Carney's game plan is to ask the Governor General on Sunday to trigger an election.
I haven't been Prime Minister for a week yet, and you can see what we've done thus far. We can do even more with that strong and clear mandate to move forward for the country, for all Canadians.
After a year trailing far behind the Conservatives in the polls, the Liberal Party appears to have turned its political fortunes around. After Justin Trudeau resigned, Donald Trump threatened Canada, and Mark Carney took over as Prime Minister.
It's one of the most unprecedented shifts in public opinion we've seen in modern history.
If Canadians voted today, Eric Grenier says polling suggests the Liberals could win a tight race.
Maybe potentially getting a majority government that even Justin Trudeau couldn't get in the last two elections.
After losing some ground in the polls, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in Quebec announcing pre-approved areas for industrial construction projects and defending his campaign's decision to bar journalists from traveling on his party's bus and plane during the campaign.
We will have open media across the country. Local media will have the ability to ask questions. It will be refreshing to hear from local outlets on what they have to say about their local priorities.
The decision means it could be harder for political journalists to attend press conferences in remote areas and hold Poilievre to account.
He gets defensive, he gets offended, he can't handle questions.
The NDP's leader is fighting for his political life. His party's being squeezed out of the race. Polling suggests his party's at risk of losing official party status, and he's at risk of losing his own seat.
News for everybody, we're not going anywhere. We're always going to fight for working people. We're not going anywhere.
The polls lately have shown just how dramatically and quickly public opinion can change and could continue to change during the election campaign, which we're expecting to be short. Sources say that Canadians could head to the polls on April 28th or May 5th. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney is being honored with a commemorative postage stamp.
3, 2, 1, on y va. Voilà, baptême de Brian Mulroney.
His family performed the unveiling in Montreal. Mulroney died February last year, just weeks before his 86th birthday. He served as the 18th Prime Minister from 1984 to 1993. Stamps recognizing former Prime Ministers are a long-standing tradition at Canada Post, and today was also Mulroney's birthday. Sunwing passengers say the airline needs to be held accountable for a string of recent flight delays and cancellations. As Sophia Harris reports, some left vacationers stranded outside of Canada for days with no rebooking offers.
Chrissy Downs had to unpack from the vacation she never had after Sunwing canceled her flight to Cuba last month with no offer of a rebooked flight.
I was just really disappointed. There was nothing, no explanation, no I'm sorry, no we'll try to work something out.
Amid snowstorms and the Delta plane crash in Toronto, Sunwing canceled dozens of flights last month, wreaking havoc on vacation plans. Hans Roach and his wife made it to the Dominican Republic, but Sunwing canceled their flight back home, leaving them stranded for 5 days.
It was a very anxious 5 days. Every day we would pack up all our luggage, get down to the lobby at noon, and hope and pray that we had a flight.
Before finally boarding their return flight on day 6, Sunwing charged Roach and his wife each a $50 flight change fee.
It's an indignity.
In an email, Sunwing apologized to passengers and said those with canceled vacations will get a full refund. The airline said slowdowns at Toronto's Pearson Airport caused by the plane crash, bad weather, crew constraints, and limited hotel capacity hampered operations last month. But this air passenger rights expert says Sunwing still has to follow federal rules, requiring major airlines to rebook passengers as soon as possible after canceling flights, even if that means buying passengers tickets on another airline.
This is what they're required to do under the law. It looks like in this case, Sunwing just made up their own rules.
Unhappy customers are now trying to claim compensation from Sunwing. But every time Downs tries to submit a claim, Sunwing says she can't because she canceled her flight.
I hadn't canceled my trip. I'm insulted.
The Canadian Transportation Agency says it's looking into the Sunwing cancellations and that dissatisfied passengers can file a complaint. But they may be in for a long wait. The agency currently has a backlog of more than 85,000 air passenger complaints. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Vancouver.
A preliminary report has been completed on the February 17th crash at Toronto Pearson Airport. Many questions still remain on how the plane ended up flipping over on the runway. Well, CBC's Thomas Dagler has more on what's been determined so far.
In the final seconds of Delta Flight 4819, new data shows the plane hurtled toward the ground at more than 1,100 feet per minute, setting off an internal warning alarm, then this. The fiery crash igniting a cloud of jet fuel and sending the plane skidding upside down on the snowy Pearson Airport runway.
Everybody's been cooperating greatly.
Ken Webster is the Transportation Safety Board's lead investigator.
From 150 feet down, their rate of descent increased, and there was
an alert or warning from the warning system on the aircraft of a sink rate, indicating the high descent rate.
These new pictures released by the TSB show carry-on luggage that flew to the ceiling and the small roof hatch that the two pilots had to crawl through to escape.
Which the report doesn't really go into detail is the conversation that took place in the cockpit between the pilot flying and the pilot assisting. There should be a constant chatter.
The TSB's initial report confirms it was the first officer flying that Bombardier jet. She had been hired 13 months prior. The more experienced captain also sitting in the cockpit.
I think it was the negligence of the first officer who was flying the aircraft that caused the accident.
Investigators aren't laying blame and haven't yet determined a cause, though questions remain about that first officer's botched landing.
I remember telling my wife that we seem to be going fast.
Delta Airlines says it won't comment while the incident is still under investigation. The company is facing at least 9 separate lawsuits from passengers who all say they were badly hurt in the crash. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Richmond Hill, Ontario.
Donald Trump is pursuing a promise to pull the federal government out of education and leave it to the states.
This is a very popular thing to do, but much more importantly, it's a common sense thing to do.
He signed an order to dismantle the $250 billion Department of Education, calling it wasteful and tainted by liberal ideology. Federal funding will continue for low-income schools and children with disabilities. Still, Democrats say they'll fight the move in courts and in Congress because more vulnerable students will feel those cuts. Hamas has fired its first barrage of rockets at Israel in response to the country shattering a 2-month ceasefire earlier this week. It comes as Israeli officials warn of more airstrikes and what increasingly appears to be a slide back into a full-scale war. Crystal Given-Singh has the latest from East Jerusalem.
For the first time in nearly 2 months, air raid sirens sounded across Israel, sending people running for shelters. In one situation, there were rockets fired from Gaza. Hamas saying those are the result of, quote, the Zionist massacres on civilians. Israeli officials say one of those rockets was intercepted. 2 others landed in what was described as open areas. An Israeli government spokesperson said that when it comes to the ballistic hypersonic missile that was sent from Yemen, that was shot down before it entered Israeli airspace. A spokesperson for the Houthi military wing said that that missile was sent towards Ben Gurion Airport. In all of these cases, no Israelis were injured, but it has changed the dynamic. Previously, we only saw activity happening in Gaza, and that activity continues. Airstrikes and ground operations. Israeli officials are once again sending out a warning to those in Gaza, telling them to move away from communities along the border to head west towards the coast, saying there will be more airstrikes and ongoing ground operations, and they need to heed those warnings for their own safety. Meanwhile, UN officials are calling for ceasefire to go back into place, for negotiations to take place again. We're also hearing that call from officials in the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. Given the situation with the Houthis firing a missile earlier in the day, there are deep concerns that there will be regional escalations. Crystal Given-Singh, CBC News, East Jerusalem.
When it comes to rising sea levels, a usual reason has been melting ice sheets and glaciers. But last year, there was a different main cause. More on this after the break.
I'm Stephen Quinn, and I love living here in Vancouver, BC. It's a city with world-renowned beauty, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. In our new daily podcast, This is Vancouver, we're exploring the diverse range of issues and stories in this city, the good, the bad, and everything in between, as told by the people who live it every day. Don't miss This is Vancouver, available wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll talk to you soon.
Global sea levels rose faster than scientists anticipated last year. As Johanna Wagstaff explains, for the first time, NASA reports the main driver wasn't melting ice sheets and glaciers, but rather the expansion of warming ocean water.
Sea levels rose a lot faster than expected last year, but it's not what you're thinking, because it's not melting ice or glaciers. Last year's rate of rise was this much, compared to the amount they expected here. In the science world, that's a lot to be off. And it's all because of something called thermal expansion. Watch this. Don't worry, we dug this out of recycling, but this bottle is filled with room temperature water. You can see the water coming up through the straw to where it's marked. We put the bottle next to this incandescent lamp that will eventually be replaced with an LED bulb, and we waited about 20 minutes for the water to heat up and the water to rise. Basically, warmer water takes up more volume. A higher temperature means that the water molecules are moving faster, causing them to take up more space. Up until now, sea level rise has been mainly due to the melting of ice sheets and glaciers, and a little bit because of thermal expansion. But last year, it flipped. That surprising increase was because of thermal expansion. 2024 was the hottest year on record. So the top layers of the ocean, where the warmest water usually sits, reacted quickly to that extra heat. And because it was an El Niño year, which means the Pacific Ocean water was being sloshed around more than usual, those top warmer layers mixed down and increased ocean volume. The good news is that now we can enter these new observations into our climate models and get better predictions and solutions moving forward.
Darius Madavi joins us again now with the first look at the weather. Darius, I hear it's the first day of spring.
That's right, and this doesn't show that, so let's go here. Look, isn't that better? This is a different spring graphic than the one I had before, and I wanted to show them both off. And like I said earlier in the show, the first day of spring also means that it is the Persian New Year, so Nowruz Mubarak to all those who celebrate. Today is also the World Day for Glaciers. This is the first one because 2025 has been named by the UN the International Year of Glacier Preservation. And I thought this tied in nicely with Johanna's excellent piece that we just watched. So I wanted to highlight the fact that, first day, World Day for Glaciers, and every March 21st after this one will also be that same day. So something to look forward to, I guess. Now, let's take a look at the conditions we have across the province because we do have some weather statements in place for those mountain passes. 20 to 30 centimeters of snow coming for some of the mountain passes heading from the coast into the interior, and an air quality statement for Golden because of the dust that's in the area. I also want to highlight how intense the precipitation might be at times tonight on parts of the west coast of the island in particular, and freezing levels being low enough that we are still getting snow on the mountaintops. Big dumps of snow coming to a lot of the ski resorts on the coast, and then also that snow lingering into tomorrow for the more interior ranges, which means plenty of snow for them as well. And I also want to highlight a bit of a break on Saturday, and then Friday night into Saturday, and then that bigger system arrives on Sunday, which may be just the first taste of an atmospheric river that could be hitting BC next week. A low-level one, but still expect significant moisture. I'll talk more about that in a second. First, I want to show you that snow breaking into the interior. Again, lots of snow coming to parts of the southeast, most of it coming tonight and then coming in another round on Sunday. And then we're going to have a bit of a reprieve in between there and some flurries breaking into the interior and showers popping up on the coast in those in-between times. As we head into the next 2.5 days or so. Total shouldn't be excessively high in most places, but again, this is before most of that Sunday precipitation arrives, Saturday night to Sunday precipitation. So this totals will be higher if we factor that in as well, and Vancouver missing the worst of it. But here we go. This is this atmospheric river that was originally, we were supposed to get a blast of the moisture from it on Sunday, but then it was supposed to stay south of us. Now it looks like it might be doing that fire hose thing that atmospheric rivers like to do. So it may be coming to the coast as well for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Unclear whether that will happen. It's a bit up in the air, but we will keep you posted. Conditions across the province tomorrow, lots of flurries, lots of showers, chance of thunderstorms in the southern interior in particular. And once again, Baneet, a pretty confusing 5-day forecast, but I think we've run through most of it already. Bit of sunshine in there.
Welcome to spring. Thank you, Darius.
Thank you.
And from tales of pirate treasure to the Titanic shipwrecks might fascinate you. And for a diver in Nova Scotia, that interest has turned into a mission. The CBC's David Irish has the story.
The murk, the tidal currents, the darkness. The problem with shipwrecks, of course, is you gotta know how to overcome all of that to explore them. Or do you? Michael Schwinghammer started the Nova Scotia Shipwreck Mapping Project a couple of years ago. He's the webmaster, the diver, photographer, 3D modeler, and he's driven to capture these wrecks before they're lost to time.
No one's looking after it and doing the preservation of it. And at least this is a digital preservation of it at that one point. And I just want some people to be able to go and experience it.
His passion feeds his persistence, like in the case of a ship believed to have sunk by the Halifax explosion in 1917.
Drop line goes down, and it's like that 1 in 1,000 time where it actually goes perfect. And it's right on this wreck. There's not much current. Visibility's pretty good. And there's just this broken down ship in front of me. And I'm like,
he lays down a visual reference for measurements, then swims back and forth above the wreck, taking overlapping photos with a consumer-grade camera. Then back at home, he imports them into a computer program that looks for common points in the photos and interpolates depth.
the magic is all in the software.
Photogrammetry has allowed Schwinghammer to publish models of 12 wrecks on his website.
I'm incredibly privileged. The diving community in Nova Scotia is really small. When you have passion and you sort of push for things, you sort of meet more and more people that are like-minded and that want you to go further. And the wreck is what matters. And it's super difficult to do. It's stupidly time-consuming. You've spent a huge amount of money on gear, and there's no return for any of these things. So you're just kind of doing it because you love it.
Schwinghammer plans on deeper dives, more wrecks, more mysteries, and one in particular.
The wreck that everyone wants to find in Nova Scotia is called HMCS Esquimalt, the last Canadian warship that was sank in World War II. And it's just out in the outer harbor, but we don't know where it is.
Is that your white whale?
Oh, there's probably, yeah.
David Irish, CBC News, Halifax.
With spring break in full swing, some kids in the Okanagan are spending their time building go-karts. It's an effort to teach them new skills. After the break, we'll look at their projects.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
Are you ready, Vancouver? We're in for an epic ride celebrating Canadian music at the Junos. From March 27th to the 29th, join CBC at the Let's Hear It Live Juno Block Party, taking place at the Vancouver Art Gallery in Robson Square, and the Juno Fest concerts at over 10 venues across the city. For the complete lineup and event schedule, visit cbc.ca/JunosBC.
Hammering, sawing, and go-karting. One of those things is not like the other. Kids in the Okanagan are learning those skills and more at spring break camps this week and next week.
CBC's Sonia LaRouche checked out a camp at Okanagan College in Penticton.
Kids are working away, hammering, building, sawing and drawing.
Oh, just making this.
During a week-long workshop at Okanagan College in Penticton. For the first time, the campus is organizing spring break camps for kids. What are you sawing?
I'm sawing a piece of wood that we're gonna turn into the wheels of our mini go-kart over there.
At this week's camp, it's all about these. For kids in grades 4 to 6. Warren Edis is a program administrator for the college.
It's maintenance and learning how to fix the go-kart and check the tire pressure, those sort of things, as well as race the go-karts. That's the big desire.
They race Friday, showing off what they've built for friends and family. The goal of the camp is not just the fun ride, but teaching these kids different skills and new tools.
So the fact that they can pick up a wrench and then I can say, well, this is how it's used. Or I can point around the room and say, well, that's bolted into place and that's, right? And they're like, well, why is there a toilet in the corner? Because there's people who, do you think your toilet just landed in your house one day? Like someone has to install that in your house and connect it and make it work.
Edie says there was so much interest in the camps, they started a wait list.
I'm like drawing a bear so I can like cut it out and then like write my name on it and do like forest designs.
Nice.
And like I can hang it up in my room.
Which one was harder, hammering or screwing?
Screwing.
Screwing. Why was screwing harder?
Because I've had to take like 5 breaks on this one.
Edis focuses on trades and apprenticeship at Okanagan College, but is thinking a generation ahead. And says the goal of these camps is to inspire lifelong learning.
So the hope is that the youth and young adults and teenagers will always be looking for something new to learn and experience. That's the hope.
Sonia LaRouche, CBC News, Kelowna.
Man, I want to go to spring break camp.
I know. I want to go go-karting. You build the go-kart, and I will race it.
That's not fair.
I know.
Maybe
I'm stealing the
okay,
good
fine.
part from you. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, YouTube, and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And I'll have your full local news forecast, newscast, not forecast, that's his
That's
job,
me.
at 11 o'clock right after the National. Good night.
Good night.